Tom, I just welcome you to the show, and I appreciate that you spent so much time with us in Ottawa. You were one of the pivotal players when the truckers were there. You were doing news briefs, and in fact, it was so emotional for you. You had your accounts frozen. You understand exactly what Canada's facing right now, and I just thank you for standing.
Well, the more important thing of that right now in this moment is that you are in a position to tell this story. And that right now is the best fight we have, is having alternative media, because we're getting completely stonewalled by legacy media or government funded media. We are getting completely stonewalled at every turn. And what is vital is for alternative media outlets like yours that have such a huge following to be able to tell the truth to Canadians. And with this bill C10, C11 at the federal level, um, that is a direct assault on the freedom of speech in this country, where the government of Canada really is actively trying to control everything that people see. And I've said this before that in 1932, when Adolf Hitler was elected Chancellor of Germany, the very first thing he did is he gave every household a free radio because he controlled the airwaves of that radio. So he controlled whatever narrative that he wanted. And this is yet another, and you alluded to it, greatly, perfectly, really, is that this government is so out of touch and so upside down that the Liberal Party of Canada, you can't even recognize it. And what they've done is they've dragged the Liberal or the NDP right along with them. And I don't recognize the country that I'm in anymore. And I don't recognize it because largely the mainstream legacy media has a lot to do with pushing forward propaganda to Canadians. And you know what that's like.
Yeah, I sure do. And we saw what happened. We saw the propaganda that came against us. You were on the front lines, Tom. I'm just wondering, I know we're going to talk about you running for a party, and I think probably that has come out of everything that you experienced and the fight that you had to go through in Ottawa. I was so moved. I remember, just seeing you in tears, seeing you, a strong man just in shock at what they were doing.
Yeah.
And especially the day, I remember the truckers had stood down and they were leaving because they were starting to get their trucks smashed. And yet,
Yeah.
our government and the Conservative Party of Canada, for that matter, didn't go to Parliament the night before to make sure they had a deal to protect us. And it was citizens that were attacked. It was pedestrians. It was just Canadian people walking on the sidewalk that then got attacked the next day. That's how pathetic this was.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember. I mean, you and I were both there, in that room the day I gave that announcement that we were going to peacefully withdraw from the city of Ottawa. And I, you and I talked after I delivered that message, and yeah, honestly, it was gut wrenching. It was extremely emotional for me, um, because that was really the second day of seeing Justin Trudeau send the worst police in this country to go and attack Canadians in the way that they did. And on top of that, the things that they actually did to Canadian forces veterans who had served in Afghanistan and only years ago fought to defend this country were now getting the crap kicked out of them by law enforcement at the very foot of the National War Memorial in this country, then arrested. And then when they were released, they dropped them out in the country in the winter. And these people were wearing their medals. So there's no forgiveness and there's no mistaking that the police that did that to our veterans, and I'm not saying that veterans are better than the average Canadian, but the difference there is that Canadians literally have put their lives in harm's way for this country. And at the very symbol of that sacrifice, Justin Trudeau, who is a pathetic, weak coward, never once offered to come and actually talk to us.
But Tom, just thank you for just explaining exactly what happened there. And this is the sadness of our country. And I hope I didn't cut you off with what you were saying. Say anything more that you want, because this is, I think, what is leading a lot of us to join the political realms, to try to have a voice in there. In as much as we are losing hope in our politicians, we still feel that there's a part of us that has enough, that we're going to step forward. And I know you have joined the Ontario Party, and
Yes.
one of the things that is covered is education
Mhm.
with the provincial politics. And I think it's great you joined Derek Sloan's party.
Yep.
And how did that come about, and what does that mean to you?
So, I became aware of Derek Sloan very early on when him and Randy Hillier and Maxine Bernier and others had started the No More Lockdowns caucus. And so that's really the first time Derek had ever popped up on my radar. And, going forward, um, I remember when Derek had brought Dr. Byron Bridle and some other MDs to Ottawa to do the press conference. And it was one of the most widely viewed um, YouTube videos from the government of Ontario that we'd ever seen. But YouTube censored it and took it down. And, I knew that Derek was fighting back against all of this stuff. And I knew that Derek also had 7 court summits because he's been very active pushing back against the mandates and the government restrictions. And so that was something right there. When I'm looking at somebody who is a leader, you really need to have skin in the game if you expect people to follow. And Derek has been fighting all along. And so when I had an opportunity after I returned home from the convoy, I was invited to a meeting that I couldn't attend, but I had sent a friend also to ask this one specific question. And it is, if an elected MPP in the Ontario Party were to vote against what the party wanted, would they be treated like how Doug Ford just kicks you out of the party? Or would you be free to vote for your constituents or your conscience, which is really what a true democracy is? And so the answer to that question is yes, we are about true democracy. You vote for your constituents, your conscience, and look at the party without fear that you will be removed from the party, which is what Doug Ford has been doing all along. He doesn't like you, you push back, he just removes you. That is a dictatorship. So the way I saw it is that Doug Ford sits in every one of those 67 ridings that his party belongs to. And the elected MPP is nothing more than just an admin assistant for that area. They're not elected. They have no power. They have no voice in Doug Ford's caucus. So what that means is in Ontario, one person, it's Doug Ford who decides the fate of, your future in this province. And so this is where I started to look at the Ontario Party. And the more I looked at it, the more I was happy. I believed in the leader. Strongly, I believed in Derek Sloan. And I believe in the platform. And they are coming out for all of the right things. All of the damage that has been done in the last 2 years by Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau, and now Jagmeet Singh, who's basically given him an unelected majority government. The Ontario Party, the aim for Ontario right now is to right all of the wrongs that these 2 levels of government have done to Ontario. And, and as an example, one of the first things we're going to do is pass legislation in Ontario for anybody who has lost their job due to unpaid leave or vaccine mandates will be reinstated with back pay. And if the employee believes that the environment is too toxic now, then the employer will also be responsible for not only the back pay, but severance as well. So
That
there's a
is
lot to fix.
fantastic.
Yes. And that will be legislated.
That is fantastic, and I think that when all of this is told, there should be more lawsuits and everything. That all of this
Mhm.
complying with such a
Mhm.
ridiculous mandate from the government or whoever, and even the government sometimes they didn't even they just expected the provinces or the provincial people or businesses to implement their horrible vaccine
Mhm.
strategy
Mhm.
and their agenda, and that was pure evil. You know, when I saw the weakest moment from Doug Ford was when he stood there at a conference and said, if you think we're going to go against the provincial health officers, like no one's going to do that, basically. But he's wrong. A strong leader
Yeah.
would go against
Yes.
them and push back on that, and that would be Derek Sloan and men like yourself.
Yes. Yeah. And I spoke about this recently because when Doug Ford did that, because I was watching, I heard it. What I heard in my ear was, I'm not going to risk my political career. I'm not going to risk myself for the people of Ontario. I'm not going to risk losing my power, losing my access to these mandates that have proven to increase his personal net worth by about $50 million, because he's the one who owns Delco Signs, which is all of us are standing in grocery stores on the signs that his company produces, 6 feet away. So what I heard clearly was two things. I heard a person who does not understand the difference between abdicating responsibility and taking responsibility. He was elected to take ultimate responsibility for this entire situation. Nobody elected the bureaucrats. Nobody elected the chief medical officer. And in fact, what's even more of an issue of incompetence is the fact that Doug Ford did not use Emergency Management Ontario, which should have been the lead agency in this province that was responsible for coordinating the entire pandemic response going back 2 years. And EMO would have put Doug Ford in a position to keep him constantly aware of the evolving situation. EMO would have coordinated all of the medical advice, all of the financial advice, all of the education advice, all of the right advice, collated that into decision briefings that Doug Ford would have probably received every 12 to 24 hours if they were looking for him to make a final decision on based on a recommendation. And it was Doug Ford who is ultimately responsible as the elected premier to make those final decisions. It is not the chief medical officer's legal responsibility to do that. It rests solely with the premier of a province. EMO exists to handle emergency management in any province. Every province in Ontario has one. And if people want to learn more, look at the interviews from retired Lieutenant Colonel David Redmond. We had a pandemic response plan in this province. The military had one. It's called Op Laser. I know because I had to read it when I was posted to Toronto at the headquarters. So there was a plan. Doug Ford had every opportunity, or really, he should have just used his EMO office instead. And I like to use this analogy. EMO would have been the hub in a wheel. All those other agencies and players would have been the spokes. And what he did is he removed EMO from the hub. He grabbed one of the spokes and he said, "You're now in charge of the entire wheel." They're completely set up for failure as opposed to EMO being set up for success. And that was all done by Doug Ford and his incompetence. And now the very same guy who locked everyone down, shut down businesses, made them go bankrupt, and is responsible for all the things, is refusing to take responsibility. And he's now on the campaign trail trying to get reelected so that he could keep doing what he's been doing for 4 more years.
Talking.
It's
And
deplorable.
it's deplorable, and he's such a coward, and I
Yes.
thank God for men like Derek Sloan and like yourself. I saw true men of integrity. I've seen you in the battle. Now When you just said, you just alluded to having to know about this emergency response plan, and I thought maybe everybody doesn't really know your background. Can you
Yeah.
tell us some of the things that have given you sort of a great perspective on what we're dealing with?
Right. So in 2008 to 2010, I was posted to, it's now called, it's had a name change, but it's now called four Division Headquarters in Downsview, Toronto, at Denison Armory in Toronto. And I was posted to the Divisional Engineer branch at the headquarters. And during my time there, I was also, as a secondary duty, I was on the Army Commander's assessment team. It was called the CAT, Commander's Assessment Team, so that if there was a domestic emergency in the province, I would have been deployed out to the field as an assessor from an engineer point of view. And so every September at that headquarters, when I was posted there for 2 years, we would do a domestic operation exercise. And we would also have to review all of the contingency plans in case there was specifically it was called Op Laser. Op Laser was a domestic response to an endemic or pandemic or whatever that was declared. And we saw this in the early days of this pandemic where the military in Ontario actually activated Op Laser and they started putting soldiers at Canadian base Borden. And they sat there for 3 months almost without an actual mission other than they went into long-term care facilities, which really is exactly what should have been done under the EMO plan. So my what I know about EMO was every morning for the commander's briefing, I sat beside the EMO representative who himself was a retired brigadier general. So we have a representative for the Army headquarters embedded who belongs specifically to Emergency Management Ontario. And their whole role is to handle emergencies for the province of Ontario.
Wow.
So anyway, I didn't back up. I did spend, maybe some of your viewers know, but I spent 25 years in the Canadian Army. I was a reservist, and then I transitioned and I did 18 years in the regular force as a commissioned officer in the Canadian Army.
Wow. Thank you for your service for our country. Appreciate that so much, and appreciate the experience that that's given you in the fight of our lives. I'm so glad that you are standing up. You did speak of Derek Sloan. He is an amazing
Mm-hmm.
person. He did set himself apart in that he was willing to tackle some of the
Yes.
very toughest, um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, issues that our country was facing, and he often got in trouble for it because he would have
Mm-hmm.
the sheer courage and strength to stand up and say something when many others wouldn't. I think it's terrific. I think that he's
Yes.
going to do very well.
I believe so too. And I in the military, leadership is almost good leadership is almost an obsession. And you learn very quickly who can lead and who cannot. And it's hard because sometimes you find somebody you don't want to follow, and I've met them, and some people that are very inspirational, and you will follow them anywhere. And Derek is a man of character. He leads by example. He will be the first boots on the ground, and he'll be the last. That's just the type of character that Derek is. And where he will point, I will follow, unless my constituents tell me otherwise. Derek has what it takes. And I know other veterans that have met Derek and they said, you know what? The more time I spend with you, the more I believe in your ability to lead this party. And so that's Derek Sloan. I mean, for me, it's fundamental that I can get behind a leader that I will go the extra mile for because I want to, not because it's my job to. There's a difference in sense of motivation. And Derek is that man. He's the real deal.
It's He really is. And Tom, I can only say that so are you the real deal. And so this is going to make an excellent grouping with what you're going through. We've been having trouble seeing you, but I think we've been hearing you. Your internet maybe had a little glitch there or whatever, but we were
Right.
able to hear everything that you said. I'll give you the final
Good.
word about why Ontario communities need to consider voting in a brand new party with the Ontario Party. You've said an awful lot already, but I stand behind you. I think you guys would do a great job, and many of them are looking for leadership, even in the educational realms, and especially like looking at getting small businesses supported and whatnot back from the brink of disaster that we've been in. We have a big problem with the federal government, that's for sure. But when you can get your house in order on a provincial level, it's going to go a long way. So give your best pitch again. We've got a lot of people from Ontario on the line right now. They're saying hello on the feed, and they support you. We can see support for you. So what would you say to anybody who's on the fence about who to vote for?
So a couple of really interesting, really important points I want to make here. And one, we have 105 confirmed candidates out of a possible 124. So we have plenty to form a government and also even to get a majority. Ontarians just have to take a chance. If they really, honestly, legitimately want change, they're going to have to take a chance on the Ontario Party. But here's an important thing. Our population for Ontario is 14.5 million. We have more than Quebec and BC combined, and then some left over. Doug Ford has proven really to be a liberal and conservative clothing, and he is, in my view, a weak, cowardice man who is Justin Trudeau's third lapdog, just behind Jagmeet Singh. So if we take away Doug Ford from Justin Trudeau, then we take away the most heavily populated, the biggest power base, we take away from Justin Trudeau. And no matter what happens in the future, if there's another election in 3 years, 2025, well, Justin Trudeau is not going to get Ontario. So he's going to have to really work hard to get reelected, because I think he barely got 17% of Canadians made sure that he became prime minister. So, that's the big picture strategic reason to vote for our party, because we are actually talking about suing him in court because Pearson International is in Ontario. These are our skies. So in terms of the mandates and not allowing 6 million Canadians to fly because they're not vaccinated and all these ridiculous mandates, well, guess what? These are our skies in Ontario, and we're actually talking about taking him to court over the mandates. That's not just it, but there are many other issues, federal issues that Ontario, if we're elected, we're not going to abide by this WHO thing, this mass abomination that's coming up in next week. I don't care what Justin Trudeau signs up to. Our party is not going to support the WEF, and we are not going to support the WHO deal that Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh are lining up to impose on all of us. So as a province, we are not going to abide by these things, and we're willing to take Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh, the Deputy Prime Minister, to court. So we're not going to put up with this stuff anymore. Canada is ours, and I say this all the time. Our politics is out of control. We just need to get control of politics in this country.
Yes, we do. And I'm so glad to hear that. And thank you for being so aware of these things that are being done by the WEF. We cannot lose our sovereignty. We cannot. And if we're going to have a government, a federal government that gives away our sovereignty, we cannot comply. I mean, it's that simple. We can barely comply with anything they're doing now. I mean, it's just awful.
Agreed.
We just have to stand and just say we're not doing it. And so you being aware, and I know Derek's aware because he's always aware. He's on the cutting edge even of the science regarding vaccines and all of that. He is totally, I think one of the finest leaders. And I'm so glad that you have put your hat in to run with him and to shore him up, because that's two fantastic people. And I know there's more than just two. You've got almost, enough basically that you could take a majority. Would be amazing. Wouldn't that be great for Ontario? Now, if we could just do it in British Columbia. So, one province at a time.
Yes.
Yeah, well.
But we're the first domino. We could be the first domino to take the Liberal. Like, I just refer to both federally and provincially to these parties as the uniparty, because I cannot tell the difference between any of their platforms.
Yeah,
It's just a different level of insanity, from one party to
it
another.
really is.
Um,
Yes,
and it's all left leaning. We're the only legitimate right leaning party.
100%.
Doesn't make sense
I just
anymore.
think you, no, no, nothing makes sense, and we need you more than ever. Thank you so much. If Ontarians are smart, they're going to let Doug Ford be kicked to the side, and they're going to put in a new party,
Yes.
and that'll be you guys. So thank you very much. Thank you for all you're doing, and Tom, I can't wait to hear
Thank you.
more about your journey. Thank you for all you've done.
Thank you.
Take care.
And it's great to see you
Yes,
again. Honestly, it's
good.
been too long.
Great to see you. It has been too long.
Thank you. Yeah.
Maybe in Ontario in July or
Sure.
June,
Yes.
July. I'm going to be coming through there. Okay,
That'd
good.
be great.
Take care, Tom.
Okay.